This is
Good morning.
This is the meeting of the joint board between the Community Health Council and Betsy Cadwallader, the Health Board. I apologise for the delay in starting. We had technical difficulties and we plan to run now from 10 o'clock to around 11:30. I've got apologies recorded here for Joe Whitehead, who is away with a personal commitment, Teresa, who is on leave, and Nikki and Callow and Hugh Evans, who also can't be here for other commitment reasons. Jeff, Jackie, did you want to say welcome and also any apologies from your end?
We're going to take our apologies as read, if you don't mind, this morning. But I am going to take this opportunity before we get to the agenda item, just to say thank you all for attending at such a late stage. So thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. So are there any declarations of interest to be declared, first of all, in any of the items to be addressed in this meeting? No. Okay. The minutes of the last meeting have been circulated. There were two actions, one resting with Helen and the other with Teresa. I've checked with both Helen and Teresa. The actions have been discharged and communication continues on both subjects. Jeff, Jackie, are you happy with that update in terms of the actions?
I am, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll carry on, if I may, Jackie, until we get to your item, but we come then to a combined presentation where we're going to address the different topics listed on the agenda. And the first concerns the update on the cover arrangements and the recruitment of a new Chief Executive Officer. So could we put the presentation up, please?
Sharing now, Mark.
Thank you. So there's the items that we're going to cover in this meeting. Can you move us on to the first substantive slide? The next one, thanks. So colleagues in this meeting and from the Community Health Council will be aware that Joe Whitehead, our existing Chief Executive Officer, has announced her intention to retire, and her last effective day in the office will be the 15th of December, and then she will be on leave through to the 15th of January. The Remuneration Committee has met and agreed that Jill Harris will act as the Chief Executive Officer from the 16th of January, but will, between the period of the 15th of January and the 15th of December and 15th of January, provide cover for Joe. As I've said, it will be on leave. It has to be covered because Joe has to remain the accountable officer during that period. In terms of acting Deputy Chief Executive Officer, Jill, do you want to give an update on that and also the acting interim post that follows in that bullet point for me?
Okay, so if I can say that the acting Deputy CEO, there has been an interview process that has taken place across the organisation. I'm pleased to confirm that Nick Lyons will be picking up that post, acting into my deputy role. It's all very confusing, isn't it? But acting into my deputy role. In terms of my substantive role as the Executive Director of Integrated Clinical Services, The HR team are currently looking to see how we can cover that on an interim basis. So that is being managed externally, and we are confident that we'll be able to backfill it in a way that ensures that we've got continuity across the patch in terms of those roles. Can I go on to the next one in terms of the senior leadership roles, Mark?
You can, yes.
So senior leadership roles in the integrated health communities, 2 of those have been made substantively. Some of you will know Fionn Johnston, who has been appointed. The second one in the East is Michelle Green, who starts with us in the beginning of January. But in the interim, her post is being covered by David Coyle, who will be joining us next week. And we have an interim appointment in Libby Ryan Davis, who is currently covering the centre. So we have all 3 of those areas and those roles covered. We've also made an appointment to the primary care director role. Karen Higgins will be joining us, although I am not able to confirm what date she is starting.
Jill, can I suggest it would be helpful both to the CHC and also to us as a health board if the latest position could be set out in the way that you've described?
I'm happy to send a briefing out with Helen's support.
Okay, all right. Is that yeah?
Thanks, yes, thanks, Mark. Thanks. That will give clarity.
All right, thank you. So
it would be useful, Chair, if we could meet with them as the opportunity arises. I think those relationships are really important.
I'm sure that can be arranged, and Jill will take that on board for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It is important, and we will arrange it.
Thanks.
So we then come to the appointment of a search partner for the substantive recruitment in respect of Joe's post. Sue Green and the workforce team have been doing some work. I've got a conversation with Sue first thing Monday morning, and then the paper will be presented to the remuneration committee for consideration in terms of the options available to us by way of a search partner, and it's for the remuneration committee to confirm which partner we will go with and how the recruitment process will proceed moving forward. Of course, Welsh Government are being kept briefed on the situation in terms of both arrangements for transition, but also in terms of our approach to recruitment, and they will be further updated after the remuneration committee. Subject to consideration of that paper, and then subject to the advice we receive from the search partner with whom we will then engage, the plan is to commence the recruitment process in November. I say subject to because we have got to understand from the search partner how the market is looking in terms of potential candidates to apply for the substantive post, and their view as to when and how we should go to the market, which is why it's listed there as subject to advice. And that's what our normal expectation would be in terms of engagement with a recruitment partner. We are, of course, committed, as we have been previously, to involve key partners, stakeholders, and particularly yourselves in the recruitment process, which will take place in the new year. I think no matter what, it's likely that subject to the notice to be served by any successful candidate, we won't see a new chief executive substantively in post before at least July, and possibly as long as September. But that will be subject to a number of factors, including the market, the notice they've got to serve, and so on and so forth. So the board, as you would have gathered from what I said earlier, is entirely comfortable with the interim arrangements that are now been put in place to manage that transitionary period. I've also spoken to both the Minister and to the Director General, and they're similarly happy with the arrangements too. So I hope you are, as a Community Health Council, in a similar position.
Yeah, we are, Mark.
No, I think that those interim arrangements give a good deal of continuity and confidence.
Thank you.
Mark, can I take this opportunity to thank Jo for everything she's done while she's been with you? Her openness and transparency has been really appreciated by the CHC, and we wish her well in whatever she does in the future.
Thank you, Jackie. It will be noted. I'm sure her colleagues and I will pass it on to her as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay, so the next item in terms of the agenda, Jackie, in the presentation is winter plan. Can I hand that over to you, please?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we've now, I believe, got a presentation for information on the winter plan update. And I will reiterate what Jeff said at the start of the meeting. We are having special meeting, one agenda item meetings with a lot of the health board, our health board colleagues, to update and give us a detail of this, a more detailed presentation of this. So you can be as brief as you want to be on these presentations.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I will ensure that I'm brief, given the context you described. So rather than go through these slides, which I hope are fairly self-explanatory, what I would like to do is give the context in which we're working at the moment. So we are working very closely with our clinical teams, as well as our wider partners, and it's good to hear that you're having those deep dive conversations, because it's really helpful about how we plan for winter. We do have a bit of a COVID update at the end, but it might be worth sort of referring to it now. We recognise that it's going to be a very difficult winter. We've got people who are really struggling with cost of living, and that's going to impact on their ability to keep warm. We have COVID increasing across the communities, and we have intelligence that the flu season is going to be quite hard upon us as well. That's also aligned with the unrest that you'll see in the health services, and you'll know that some of our staff are currently in the process of balloting around industrial action. So it's going to be an incredibly difficult winter. So I just want to put that context around that. However, the plans that we are putting in place to be able to support flow through our hospitals, working with partners, to enable to ensure that people get the right care at the right place, care as close to home as we possibly can, have become an integral part of that planning. And we have already kicked off some work with our primary care colleagues around how they can help us as well. So we've got far more joined up approach to winter, including, and I know Helen's on here, support with our communications team, and indeed asking for your support on this as well, for people to choose well when they're thinking about where they can get support, because very often our pharmacies and other services can support. So those are the points I wanted to pick out, as well as the final one, how we are working with care homes to provide 24/7 support as well, to be able to prevent people having to be moved from one place to another inappropriately, because we acknowledge that that's not always the right thing to happen. So there's a lot of work going on, a lot of pressure in the system, but our teams are working to support and progress that. And the message to get your flu jab, get your COVID jab if you're eligible for one, can I very, very clearly call out the need for that to happen if people are hesitant. It's the right thing to do. And I can confirm I've had both of mine.
Jill, on the aspect of vaccination, I think all our members really do appreciate what vaccination means. And I know when we speak to people in engagement exercises and at shows, we always say, please get your vaccinations, because the health board is getting tired. There's no end to this. So whatever we can do to help you, we will do.
And we really appreciate the public bulletins that you do on the progress of vaccination. We talked to Alan Morris about those yesterday and how valuable they are.
Thank you. We really do appreciate that support. As I say, I think it's going to be difficult for everyone, and I don't underestimate the impact of some of the increases in cost of living and how that is going to impact wider population as well. That was all I was going to say. If you're comfortable with that, I'm happy to add.
Yeah, we will be we'll be speaking to we'll be having these individual meetings, single item agenda meetings, when we can go into the depth of those, and members will have opportunities to ask detailed questions, and those will be reported publicly as they normally are for everything the CHC does.
And just to pick up on that, Jeff, it will be the feedback that we get from yourself, as you know, does play into our future plans. And and you'll see on the slides, the development of the urgent primary care centres, there will be absolutely communications going out to support those initiatives as well as they come online. There is already work taking place in Wrexham to see how we can see patients differently using our GPs and primary care colleagues at the front door.
I think that's absolutely vital, because across Wales, not just in Betsy Cadwallader, access to GPs and access to primary care is an issue that we're constantly hearing about. Not just GPs, of course, also dentists is.
Well, the dental service is non-existent.
Yeah, unfortunately.
In parts of North Wales.
In parts of North Wales, yeah, really difficult. So I think that's good. I think it's important that there's different ways of doing things that can resolve those problems, which are not only Wales wide but are UK wide.
Thanks, Jill. Over to you, Mark.
Okay, so we come on to mental health, an update on the improvement plan. As I indicated to start with, Tracy's not here, so Ian's going to cover this for the team. Thanks, Ian, for doing so. Can we just take the vibe from Jackie about keep it high level, Ian, in terms of the main headlines, please?
Will do, Mark. Thank you, and Borada. So for those of anyone that doesn't know me, my name's Ian Wilkie. I'm the Interim Director for Mental Health and Learning Disabilities. So firstly, and of fundamental importance is the fact that the patient care, safety and experience are front and centre of our improvement plans. The Mental Health and Learning Disability Division has now moved its initial plan into a format that aligns with BCU improvement plans. Sorry, I'm conscious of the fact that no, it's moving now. Okay, so Philippa, will you change the slides as I go through?
Yes, I will. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry. So the plan has been developed further to a comprehensive triangulation and thematic analysis of recommendations from inspections, reviews and reports, current, recent and historic. And 6 work streams have been identified, those being fundamentals of care, leadership, empowerment, cultural and organisational development, quality and evidence-based person-centred care, individual and timely care, environmental resource and workforce, and lastly, clinical strategy and audit outcomes. Nominated workstream leads have been identified and planned initiatives are underway, with monitor and review arrangements in place with a programme oversight group that meets on a regular basis. Additional capacity has been sought and secured, and outcome measures are in place, including ward accreditations, patient experience, etc. In relation to HSC, notice of contravention, work is in place. Move on to the next slide, please. This slide essentially denotes the programme governance framework relational to the divisional improvement plan and schedules of work. And sorry, it was the slide back from that, Philippa, sorry. And then if I move on to targeted intervention outcomes and drivers, this slide shows the 10 targeted intervention drivers, and the importance of this slide within the slide pack is to denote the linkage between targeted interventions and the improvement work. So bearing in mind bearing in mind the steer that I was given at the beginning, just to be high level, the next two slides show our plan, phased approach and next steps. And I just want to conclude by saying that the purpose of this journey is to ensure sustained embedded learning and provide the highest possible standards of care for the communities that we serve. Thank you, Mark. That was all I was going to say.
Just Ian, sorry, there's just a couple of points I'd like to raise, and that is during our recent visits, the highlight on one of your highest risks was the staffing issues and the amount of agency staff that were currently being used. Is there any improvement on that?
There's lots of different work streams in relation to the health board that are looking at identifying ways of securing staff going forward, and the need as well for the division and perhaps others to think in a more creative way about how we provide staffing. So I'm aware of the feedback that you and colleagues have provided, Jackie, and as always, very grateful for that. So just got that from Carol and Jeff at the end of last week. So currently in the process of theming that and taking it to our divisional SLT to look at all of the issues that you highlighted for the 2-year visits.
Thanks, Ian. And the other point I'd like to make is Jeff and Carol and some of the team did a safe space event around mental health, and we would, if you would think it would be helpful, redo that. We are prepared to do another safe space event around it.
I think that would be incredibly helpful, Jackie. We're always very grateful to have that interaction with people that make use of our services. I think that's invaluable.
Yeah, we have, Ian, about 113 working days left to us, and we really are prioritising those meaningful engagements with patients that can then be put into the various developments and changes that Betsy Cadwallader and WAST as well at the minute are making.
So thanks for the presentation, Ian. And if we have any further questions, are we all right to submit them in writing?
Please do, Jackie, please do.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks. So we're on to planned Claire, including the an update on the regional treatment centres, which is clearly an important project, and also orthopaedic capacity. Right. So that's mine. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we have a presentation on that, and once again, you can be as brief as you would like, because we will endeavour and ensure that we have a full days or a full morning's information meeting with people from the team. Yeah, we are.
Carol and I sitting on the project board at the minute. This is a really, really exciting project. We see it as really the only practical way that Betsy Cadwallader can address the long waiting lists that arose as a result of COVID, as they did everywhere. It's also, I think, the only way that you can have a substantial capital development that will be needed to provide these treatment centres. We've been pleased to see that Andrew Kent and his team are putting engagement with patients sort of front and centre, well in advance of any hard and fast plans.
So thank you. If I may, Philippa, can you move the slide on, please? Can you move it on again, please? Sorry. So I just want to reiterate everything that's been said. People are waiting far too long for their care right now as a consequence of COVID, and we have to be open that our waiting lists were too long before COVID, so it's just made a bad problem worse. So we are working incredibly hard, and it's good to hear of the level of engagement that is taking place and is supported by the Health Board. We do have ministerial priorities that we're working to, and the team, including Andrew Kent, are working very closely with both clinical teams and operational teams to ensure that we have capacity in place to be able to get as close to these targets as possible. So if we can move on to what we're doing. We are absolutely committed to delivering the same capacity as we did pre-COVID. You'll know that our capacity was significantly reduced in COVID, not just as a consequence of the infections, but also as a consequence of the additional precautions that we had to put in place, so reducing the sizes of our lists and our clinics. Absolutely ensuring that our policies are adhered to, and that we are learning from best practice. So you'll know that we are taking up the GIRFT programs, the Getting It Right First Time programs, to ensure that we're using the best possible evidence to be able to support the efficiencies and effectiveness of our planned care program. We are also picking up far more digital validation, so ensuring that patients who are on our list actually want to be on our list and are right to be on our list, and supporting this as well with virtual clinics and virtual assessments. We have created significant additional capacity, although we would be the first to acknowledge it's not enough, in terms of working with alternative providers that you're very well aware of, both insourcing, so bringing it into the Health Board, but also outsourcing in orthopaedics, ophthalmology and dermatology. And that does include using our facilities at the weekends, and particularly working to maximise those facilities which we can call green, off-site facilities, so Abergele being the obvious one. If we move on to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. You will see that we've got leads for each of those areas to ensure that they stay on track, and we've got the governance now in place to ensure that if there are any variations, they're picked up early and we can make the best intervention. So if we move on to Regional Treatment Centre update, and I want to put this in the context as well as the interim work that we're doing. So we have just yesterday appointed a director to oversee the programme, and he'll be starting with us at the end of this month. As you'll know, Alison Constantine was leading on this programme, but has now moved into one of the IHC posts. So we will have a director overseeing this programme. There's a lot of work being undertaken, supported by Kendall Block and our workforce team, around the modelling and our demand and capacity moving forward, because our intention is, by the time the RTC is up and running, that our waiting lists are significantly reduced. So we need to make sure that that is right. Critically, underpinning this is the clinical pathways, and I've already alluded to getting it right first time, which is part of that. But our clinicians are working really, really closely to ensure that the clinical pathways are established using the best evidence, but are in place ahead of the RTCs coming online, because you'll see the timelines for those. Alongside this, we are working particularly for orthopedics to see what temporary facilities we can bring in. So we are currently exploring opportunities to bring in modular theatres ahead of these dates to ensure that we can make progress against the waiting lists ahead of the RTCs. Alongside that, we are very much working with the British Red Cross Waiting Well scheme, the work that we've done on prehabilitation to ensure that we get the best possible outcomes for our patients when they do have their surgery, and that we are maximising our current theatre to usage, which you would expect us to do. Orthopedics, we now have the PROMS coordinators in post. We are moving what procedures we can outside of theatres, and you'll see that Rex and Milo are now in the final stages of developing a hand minor ops room, which means that we can then fill our theatre capacity with stuff that can only be undertaken in our theatres. And as I said, we're exploring additional elective capacity, both theatres and ring fence beds, and that work is being progressed. And we are looking at those temporary theatres, that increased capacity, going on to one of our green sites to be able to protect them as we go through what is going to be an incredibly difficult winter. Thank you very much.
You're on there.
Thanks, Jill. We're very keen on rehabilitation and look forward to seeing the improvements towards our patients that will give. There's just one thing that I'm going to mention. I didn't know whether to mention it now or during COVID, but I think I'll do it now because it is winter pressures. The Public Health England have announced that the new COVID strain is already starting to hit, and in December will impact quite heavily in the UK. They're already cancelling some pre-elective surgeries, or non-urgent surgeries, and they've ring-fenced 1,600 beds, I believe. Are we doing the same thing in Wales, and will that impact on your delivery of some of the winter pressure issues?
So I'll do it now if that's okay with you. So in terms of COVID, we are having conversations internal to the health board of what mechanisms we need to step up ahead of winter. So our gold mechanisms, if you will. But I do want to take into account those other things that we called out, the pressures on flu, medically fit for discharge patients who were unable to transfer at the moment for similar reasons around staffing, as we ourselves are experiencing. I think the other risk that I will call out here is our staff are not immune to COVID, even if they have had all the jabs. And we are seeing a slight increase in staff absence as a consequence of the COVID. So it's a long-winded way of saying, Jackie, sorry, that we are, nothing is going to be off the table, which is why we're trying to protect any additional capacity that we might put in place off of the hot sites.
Thanks, Jill.
We only have one set of staff, and as you know, we've had to redeploy them previously.
Right, so over to you, Mark.
And Sue Green, and an update on workforce issues and challenges. Sue?
Okay, thanks, Mark. So if we could just go to the next slide, please, Philippa. So Just in response to some of the questions that I know colleagues had asked, thought it might be helpful to do a very quick overview of where we are, and particularly focusing on recruitment and retention. So as the slide sets out, we approved a 3-year people strategy and plan at the board in May of this year, and that people strategy and plan is kind of a direct response to the discovery phase that we undertook across the organisation last year, with over 2,000 colleagues contributing to feeding back in terms of how do we make it easier for people to do the right thing across the organisation. As Ian referenced earlier on, it was also built on a number of thematic reviews of external reports that had been submitted to the organisation, internal reviews of where we hadn't delivered our best service or hadn't done as well as we should have done as an organisation. So that culminated in the people strategy and plan. The strategy is developed into the delivery of the strategy is set out in 5 main programmes. So our way of working, which is very much around how our everyday behaviours, how our everyday contribution impacts on the culture of the organisation. So how do we really develop into that compassionate and learning culture that, all of the evidence suggests is absolutely relevant for delivery of high quality, improved outcome based patient and community care. That programme is being led by Angela Wood, our new Director of Nursing and Midwifery, together with Dullan Roberts, our Chief Digital Officer, very much recognising that a number of the enablers to some of the work that we need to do, given the kind of the breadth of the organisation, will need support from a digital and a new ways of working point of view. Second programme is around strategic deployment. Sorry, no, back there you go. Thank you. Is around strategic deployment, and that's very much, there are mechanics that either really enable people to do the right thing easily or get in the way of that. So just to give some examples, our business planning processes, our business case processes, those sort of things that colleagues fed back really kind of get in the way of them doing the right thing easily. Then we've got how we organise ourselves, and we've had discussions with colleagues before about our new operating model. Clearly, the structure of the organisation is only one element of the operating model, and really making sure that there's that golden thread through the organisation from delivery through to board, as well as across the organisation, in that really optimising the fact that we are an integrated health organisation. Then there is best of our abilities, and there's a little bit more detail on the best of our abilities. This is really making sure that we create the environment that people want to come and work and develop. And of course, that will contribute significantly towards our ability to recruit and retain the best staff. And then finally, how do we transform and improve? Really thinking, and this is fundamental in terms of our cultural development, how do we better enable colleagues across the organisation to transform and improve their own services, as well as contribute to the improvement of services across the piece. I've said that they all contribute to recruitment and retention, and that is a very evidence-based approach. Clearly as well, we have to make sure that the process for recruitment is as streamlined and as, again, easy for people to do the right things as possible. And we've been doing a lot of work around streamlining our recruitment processes to make sure that they enable efficient and effective recruitment, rather than, as has been fed back on a number of occasions, disable that. We've been working with colleagues in NHS Wales Shared Service to really change the way that we look at those processes, whilst maintaining that absolute focus on safe recruitment and recruiting the best and most capable people. It's just a couple of headlines there in terms of some of our recruitment. So colleagues hopefully will have seen a range of campaigns out and about on social media, on digital. We're also looking at how do we get more visibility in some of our community settings, and those who don't necessarily look at kind of digital platforms for recruitment purposes. So teams are working really closely with specific specialties and what I would call the hotspot specialties where we've had difficulty recruiting previously. There's also something about that recruitment campaign looking at the conversion. So when we get people who are interested in roles, why aren't we then able to convert them to an appointment? Or when we have converted them to appointment, why are they leaving quite quickly? And that's much more based in the cultural element of it, rather than the kind of the front end recruitment. Over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of work around international recruitment, both for our nurses, but also more recently for a range of medics with the support of Nick as medical director. We are just in the process of signing off an agreement to recruit an additional 300 general nurses and 80 mental health nurses over the next 2 years, with clearly the bulk of those nurses coming in over the next 12 months. Clearly, we need to make sure that we care for, respect and treat all individuals recruited to the organisation really well. When you're coming from another country, there are some additional dynamics, both practical, for example, affordable housing, transport, that community setting, as well as the more cultural, in terms of really understanding how do we embrace diversity within the organisation. And then at the end, because there was a question that had come through, you know, how do we ever hope to achieve delivery of our plans given some of the workforce challenges? I just wanted to put it in a bit of context as well. So we have year on year increased the numbers of people that we employ. In line with that, though, we've also invested in a number of our services. So if we think of our emergency department, we think of some of our stroke services, we think of our some of our surgical specialties. We've invested in those services, which has inevitably increased the budgeted establishment. But the fact that we've got 700 whole-time equivalents employed by the organisation, more than we did last year, and that is a year-on-year increase, is hopefully a level of assurance that we are able to recruit. There are services though where we are challenged in terms of recruitment, and some staff groups where we're challenged in terms of the numbers that we can recruit, and a little bit of a headline there that we've got 107 more nurses than we did this time last year. So that's registered nurses across the piece. Again, just thought those headline metrics might be helpful. And then the second slide, please. Thank you. So again, just to give it a level of confidence, under Chris Stockport's leadership this year, we approached our planning processes very differently when improvement proposals were coming forward. We very much assessed the deliverability of those plans and the proposals before they went through for approval by the board. The first element there that you can see in our people plan is bridging the gap. So it's great if colleagues want to put forward proposals that require investment in additional people. But what we have to look at is, how have they managed to recruit and retain the people in their current budgeted establishment? And if they've got big gaps currently, are we just adding to those gaps? There's also a check in terms of, okay, so are we doing a traditional model? Are we looking at a traditional model and putting in roles that we are never in a month for Sundays going to recruit? And so how can we shift that model to more of a modern delivery model? So, you know, less medicalised, where appropriate, potentially delivered by alternative roles to the traditional nursing role. So that process is worked through and was worked through before we went into our final planning stages for this year's annual plan. We've learned a number of lessons from last year's planning process and are in the middle of that process now. So I would hope that when we get to the position of taking forward plans to the board as part of our annual planning process and our IMTP development, that we've done that resilience testing to really understand, are we putting forward plans that we believe are capable of delivery? So I just wanted to draw that out as well, given some of the questions that have come through. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. I attend quite a few meetings, and when I go to meetings that are perhaps an enhancement or a new service being provided. One of the highest risks is the lack and the inability to attract staff. And I know a couple of services that were put forward last year actually came off track because there was something like only 11% of the workforce recruited to deliver the service. What worries me is when we put anything in place, or when you put anything in place that means it's an extension of an existing service or a redeployment of another service, you're drawing staff from an existing workforce to cover those gaps. So it's weakening the service throughout the hospital or the NHS to cover new services. And I'm wondering how much of time, money, and procedures are wasted because we're not looking at the grassroots before we start to look at changing some services.
So you're spot on, Jackie, which is absolutely spot on, and it is, it has been something that we've understood as an organisation that has been done in the past. So the process that I've just described, and then the further enhanced process this year that we're going through, is also supported by a much greater understanding of our workforce, and a much better use of the data that's available to us. So those figures I quoted before in terms of 700 more people employed by the organisation this year to last year, that is 700 people new to the organisation. We have a significant amount of internal recruitment, but we're now able to separate that out and then look at the trends and the patterns so that we're clear. So if this, if I'm going to use nursing, if nurse X from this specialty always moves to area Y or other areas within this time period, rather than that being done in an unplanned way, wouldn't we be better to develop some form of promotional or succession planning process that does that then in a purposeful and planned way? Because then we're able to say, okay, so if we know that nurses are going to leave this area to go to that area as part of their development or as part of their career life cycle, if you like, then let's build that into our planning so that it doesn't leave this area light all the time.
Yeah.
And so we're much, I feel, and actually COVID really helped us with this, because the need for us to get a much more granular understanding of our workforce movement during COVID has really helped us. So we now build that into our planning processes. And from some of our services point of view, it can be quite frustrating when myself and the team are saying, okay, but A, let's think about how we could do this differently, but also B, I know you've got an ambition, but we're not going to meet that ambition with a level of investment currently. We need to get the basics sorted in your service first, and then do this over a period of time. And that is it's a really positive conversation, but it's one that needs to be managed really carefully so that we don't kind of turn people off, or they think it's a bit computer says no. And that's something I think as we're moving through some of these conversations, we're getting more mature as an organisation in understanding that.
Thanks, Sue. Just a very quick one. You've said that you've recruited 700 posts. Does that offset any people that have left the organisation, or is that in additional to the original workforce?
Okay. So that figure is, we compare the people that we employed this time last year, and it's only 2 data points, but we've got these going back. We compare the number of people that we currently employ and pay, so that it's pretty accurate, to the numbers of people that we currently employ and pay. So the numbers recruited over the period of time will be in excess of 700 because you've got that turnover in it. But we have 700 people more employed, or 700 whole-time equivalents more employed this September than we did last September.
Right, thanks, Sue. That was all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks a lot. Mark, are you able to take the next item?
Yeah, so it's we're on to progress against the actions from HIW reports and interventions.
Yeah.
And Jill and Gaynor are going to cover this, I believe. Jackie,
Thanks.
I did indicate at the start that Lucy and I have got to leave at 11. Rather than interrupt this next item, we'll just disappear off during the course of it. Can I hand the meeting over to you, please?
Yes, you can. And thanks for everything this morning, Mark. What I would like to say before you leave is that this could potentially be our last CHC/Betsy board meeting. What I would like to ask is if it's at all possible sometime early in the new year, January, February, that we try and finish off with a face-to-face board meeting.
Yeah, subject to
Yeah, that's absolutely fine by us.
Thanks.
As you'll know, our last meeting was in person, and we found it beneficial to be in the room together, as you might expect. So it'd be good to be in the room with you too.
Right. So thanks, Mark.
Okay, thanks everyone. Talk about who will.
Right, so we're going on to the progress following the HIW reports.
So Jackie, I'm going to hand over to Gaynor to take us through the improvements that have been made. And I know some of you have been certainly into YGC, but I encourage you to go view the work that's been undertaken there and the positive progress that's being made, albeit I think Gaynor and all of us will be the first to say there's still a lot of work to do.
Thanks,
but I will ask Gaynor to take us through the work that she's been supporting with the site, and I will say supporting with the site because the staff have been incredible on this journey.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Jeff and his colleague have actually been able to demonstrate the whole journey to excellence. So what we were doing around the sprint and then to the journey. What I wanted to do first of all was just do a high level summary of how we've responded to the HIW actions. So we had 4 HIW reports in total. The report from March and then an immediate report for March, a report from May, and then with immediate actions from May. When I looked at the actions, there was 144, but a lot of them are actually repetitive because some of the things that were identified in the March were still being identified in the May. So what we did was theme them all together under 5 headings: leadership, governance, safety, workforce, and paediatric management. What we then did was we aligned each of those 144 actions to one of those themes, and they were matrixed so that we could clearly see that we were answering all 144 points. So we endeavoured and did through the very hard work, as Jill said, of the staff. The staff have been very engaged in this process. All the actions were complete by the end of September, beginning of October. And when I say complete, that means that the work was done, the SOPs that we need have been written, training has commenced. What we haven't done is made sure that they're embedded yet, because that takes a longer period of time, which is why they will be part of the journey to excellence. So the 2 exceptions to the ones that I don't believe are complete yet, because we are doing a wider piece of work with the IHC and the children and younger people services to ensure that we get their input into the ED paediatric management and the ED paediatric training and competency. So that's not to say work hasn't been done. Very much so it has, and Make It Safes have been done, but we're not happy yet that we've got a fully formed SOP that has the input of all the other services that support paediatrics, e.g. orthopedics, respiratory. So the ongoing actions and audits and improvements have been incorporated into the journey to excellence, and we have we're in the process of developing a 12-month audit plan, and that is going to be overseen by the IHC senior management structure. So that way we'll make sure that it does get embedded and carried on as business as usual. I have done the presentation to HIW and shown them the whole of the journey. So where we started, how we got to where we've got, and to the point that we've now taken it into the journey to excellence, and they are pleased with that approach. I have to say that I do believe that there is the staff themselves feel very much involved. They've worked very hard, and the improvements that we can see are down to their hard work. As Jill said, I'm not saying that we haven't got a long way to go, because we have, because the issues that can be seen within the ED department, the ones that have contributed to the people in the department, can be worked on, but there is a lot of issues that have to be resolved outside of the ED department. For example, the flow, the pathways, the pre-hospital, and that's the ongoing work that's happening within the journey to excellence. There has just recently been in an article where the press actually came into the ED department, and they got a very, I think it was a very rounded, very good reflection. I didn't know they're coming in, they just went in and they talked with the staff, and I think it's very open and honest and about how they feel, and they feel that yes, mistakes have been made, yes, they're involved in the improvements, yes, there's work that we can be done, and I think that it's just generally a much better feel, and everybody wants to improve for the patients. And happy to take any questions, because it is a huge piece of work.
Thanks, Gaynor, much appreciated. Can I make a couple of observations that still concern me a little bit? Last weekend in August, I think it was either the second to last or the last weekend in August, on a Sunday morning, I visited ED at YGC, and there were 15 staff on, of which 4 were Betsy staff, and the other 11 or 12 were agency. And that does concern me. That is a high number of agency staff. The other issue that I had that day was, and again, it's not an ED failing, it's the ability throughout YGC to deliver, because the longest wait for a bed in ED was something like 1 day, 19 hours. They'd been told in the morning that there were 5 beds available that were being discharged that day, but there were 31 patients at that time. The nurse in charge said that if it continued like that, the longest wait in ED would probably be around about 3 days before they could get a bed for everybody that was currently in the ED department at that time. That isn't acceptable in any shape or form. What we did notice, and I will be honest, we noticed an improvement in the cleanliness and the way that the patients were treated in ED reception. And that was really encouraging. But as far as staffing levels went and bed provision, that was disappointing.
Okay, I'll start off with the staffing question, because actually the staffing in one sense is a very good news story, because the board has recognised that we needed to recruit more staff and the funding has been put forward, but it does take time to recruit the right level of staff. So we have got a big recruitment programme going on at the moment to make sure that we do appoint the staff. There is also, so in the interim, we are using and we are dependent upon agency staff. Quite a lot of the agency staff we use our agency staff that we have used in the past. The other thing that we are doing is we recognise, and working with Angela Wood and her team as the exec nurse, is that actually there isn't a huge pool of ED trained staff out there. So we are actually doing training programs within house, and we are looking at how we can wrap around so that when we do have a junior workforce on, that they are being supportive. We've appointed a new PDN, a practice nurse developer, and we are working with Anne-Marie's team to get some support. So that is an ongoing recruitment, but we are looking at every aspect of it, because even if we bring in new nurses now, they're not necessarily competent within the ED, but we do have a programme that will take time to get to. On the second point, that is exactly the point that I was talking about, is that we are, the reason that we've moved into the journey to excellence is it is all the other pieces of work that we need to be doing to get that flow. Because once the patients are in ED, until we have somewhere for them to flow out to, so we're doing a piece of work looking at the patients who currently attend ED. Do they need to attend ED? And if they don't, what are the alternatives that if they were there, people could have attended? So we're doing that piece of analysis. We're working with WAST to look at alternatives. We're working, as we say, with the rest of the IHC to look at how our MIUs and how the community hospitals function. And we are also looking at our pathways out as to how do we get patients back to their usual place of residence, how do we get patients back to nursing homes quickly, and how do we get patients back to area. So there are all work streams already commenced to look at those issues, but they will take time to resolve.
Thanks, Gaynor. I don't think we've any more questions here. So can we go on to the second part of this presentation, which is around vascular?
Is Nick still on the call? Is Nick
Yes,
doing
indeed.
that?
Sorry,
Oh.
apologies, having some IT issues this morning.
Thanks, Nick.
So again, it's a lot of work in progress, and in places, significant changes being made for the good of the patients we serve, and the teams working really well together. In other places, I would be the first to admit, and happy to admit in this forum, that there's still work for us, but that's the way of improvement. We've seen some really good events in the last few weeks. A lower limb ischemia, which looks at patients particularly with diabetic feet problems, took place on October the 5th, where multidisciplinary teams really worked together to problem solve and consider how those pathways could be improved. And it's where we also looked at where the significant amount of funding that the Health Board has committed to that pathway can ensure that that funding is invested absolutely in the right place. The transformational programme, bringing the vascular improvement work in line with the methodology and the style that we're using across the rest of the Health Board, is in progress. I'm hugely grateful to Gaynor, Chris and other members of the team who are leading that work. I suppose also key is staff in this area too, and you'll see that tomorrow, in fact, there is a consultant foot and ankle surgeon interview in the East, in the Wrexham area, and for us that will be key to making sure that we have the right staff, highly qualified staff, to provide leadership to the multidisciplinary teams. The last point on the bullets there, the IMTP funding, where the board has committed 5.4 million of recurrent funding into the lower limb ischemia and the vascular work. Those who diligently look at this work will see that there are now adverts on NHS Jobs, and that the Health Board really is bringing some new faces and new skills into the Health Board to support our existing teams. So a lot of work refreshing the improvement work, a lot of work to ensure that recruitment is effective and timely, and some of the discussions are really fruitful and involving clinical teams in making that work. Colleagues will know that I can talk about vascular for a long time, but perhaps pause there and take any questions.
Thank you, Nick. I'm going to pass over to Adrian.
Yes, thank you very much, Jackie. I went to the Limb Ischemia Day, and what I would like to emphasise is the hard work that the members of staff put into the service to try and make it work. And I stress the word try, because they don't feel that they are supported in developing the service. What I would like to ask is, where are you actually going to provide this service? Because it came across quite clearly that there weren't the rooms available following the guidelines from NICE to provide the service. And we get the thing is, we'll do it flexibly and we'll look at other ways. These are patients who need to be seen. They need to be investigated. They need to have their wounds swabbed. They need to have their dressings changed. They need to have antibiotics and other medications sorted and worked out if you're going to provide the service. And to provide it, say, out of hours, you need to ensure that you have the teams available to provide it. And it's very difficult when you're short of staff to get people to work out of hours. So my question is, how are you actually going to provide the rooms during working time to provide this sort of service in the 3 hospitals?
Thank you, Adrian. And you're right, it is staff and having the right staff with the right skills to do the work. And of course, that's what the IMTP is committing to providing to recruit where there are gaps in our service. Secondly, you're right, you need the space. I'm not going to say, Adrian, that's easy. And I'm not going to say that, service X happens in room B2 on a Wednesday afternoon in this forum. What I can say is that the leadership teams across the 3 integrated health communities are prioritising that and looking at that. I suspect the answer will be that we need to do this flexibly, and I know that's what you've asked me not to say, but some of it will be on the acute sites. Some of it may have to be provided in one of our community facilities, which of course is no bad thing because that may bring care closer to home. Space is at a premium, but it's a problem that we need to solve. However, we can't always have a dedicated space for each individual service all of the time, so there will need to be some detailed planning around that. So I hear what you say, but I can't give you the detailed answer. I suspect in the vascular steering group, which you sit on, Adrian, though, that's an area that we'll be exploring in detail, including a meeting next week.
Yes, it would be nice to see an answer to this, because it's such an elementary part of the service is to provide where you're going to provide the service. And it does seem it's the first step in providing the service. And we've been waiting a long time for this to happen. And one gets the sense of frustration with the staff is that they want to do better, but they can't do better. And I'll end on that.
Yeah. Could I just say that Richard Bladen had another commitment, couldn't be here. And we both know that he would make a comment about the pace of change and how it needs to be much quicker. On a positive note, you have the link to the Liverpool Vascular Network. We think that's very positive and really does need to continue until all these other issues are finished.
Indeed, thank you. And of course, some extra resilience, as has been made absolutely clear in a public forum, around also some resilience about ensuring support from Stoke should Liverpool ever be in a position not to be able to provide us the support that we need.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. I think that brings that agenda item to a close. So thank you for your time on that one this morning. And we'll go on to an update in respect of targeted interventions. I don't know who's giving this presentation. Jill, is it you?
Unfortunately, you're going to have to listen to me again. Sorry, Jackie.
It's all right, Jill.
So I'm hoping, if you can move on, Philippa, much of this will be very familiar to you. As you know, we were in targeted intervention for a number of domains, and we have that has been extended to include the YGC and the vascular domains. And we've been working hard, as you can see from the previous presentations, to make progress against those. We are still in discussion with Welsh Government about what our matrix for YGC should look like. I think we have developed one. We believe and they believe it's overcomplicated, so we're meeting with them to ensure that they are comfortable and we are comfortable, that it reflects the journey that we need to take. We have, as you know, had oversight from the Good Governance Institute. They made some recommendations to our processes to strengthen those. They were absolutely approved at our board meeting in August, and the implementation plans and the refresh that we've done on targeted intervention since Phil Meakin joined us have been fully approved by the steering group. And that does reflect a more challenging or increasing the challenge, may I say, from both executive and IM colleagues to assure ourselves of the progress that's being made. That does mean we are reflecting where we are. We've got a steering group next week to just do a check and challenge on the progress that we are making, and acknowledging that a journey isn't necessarily as straightforward as we would like it to be, and the scores can improve. But our intent should be that we want to embed those changes. So what you will see, I think, is the ambition to move up the scores to 3 and 4, as perhaps we've reflected upon that, and we believe that we've been over ambitious in some of our scores for the future. So we do believe it's going to be a longer journey to get to 3 than we initially considered, but actually we're really keen that we embed a strong level 2 before we take the steps into level 3. So just want to reaffirm that message, really. So if you can move on. So you can see there outlined the 4 questions we will use to update Welsh Government. As I say, the scoring will be confirmed at the November board meeting. We've had the board workshop, which was last week. There was some really good challenge from both executive and IM colleagues. And we have our steering group next week, where we will be taking on board all of those challenge and that comments to reflect what our self-assessment would be for November. So we don't have the scores on the doors yet, because we've taken back all that feedback, as indeed we do from the wider engagement. So and that will include a reframing of the YGC matrix following conversations with Welsh Government. Happy to take any questions. Molly, I don't know whether there's anything you want to add from a governance perspective, if you're on the call.
Thank you, Jill. I think the only point I would add is that we are also triangulating our compliance position to our scores, so there's consistency and alignment, so that we're not looking in isolation at the TI framework separate to our compliance requirements. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Molly. Jeff may have
the minister announced publicly that there would be an announcement around the progress on targeted intervention for Betsy Cadwallader, and she said that would be in October and it would be public. We've got about 10 days left.
I'm sorry, Jeff, I'm not able to answer the question of when that statement may be made. Sorry.
That's all right. I'll take it up with her, but I just thought you might have had some warning around that, but we'll take it up directly with the minister.
Thanks, Jill. It's appreciated your keeping us informed in how the target interventions are progressing. We appreciate your honesty in telling us that it will take longer to achieve the level 3 that you're aiming for. And all we can ask is that we're kept up to date on that. So thank you for that. The next agenda.
We're keen to not only keep you updated on that, but in terms of the check and challenge, we very much see your feedback as part of that.
Thanks, Jill. The next, and I think last agenda item is the COVID update.
I feel like it is, and I feel like I've given a lot of this update already. So what I can say is the incidence that we're seeing of COVID in our hospitals is increasing, and we are seeing it across staff as well. What I cannot say, because there isn't this testing that we had during the early stages of the pandemic, we're not seeing the level of testing in the community that we were. As you know, that was considerably reduced, but we do know that we're seeing it in our hospitals where we're testing. As a consequence of that, there has been some reflections on some guidance that's coming out centrally, particularly around mask wearing and IPC, which we are now taking into account. I think I alluded to earlier the fact that we've had a meeting within the health board of whether we step up gold to ensure that we've got our processes in place, to ensure that we've got the consistency as that guidance starts to come through over winter, and we'll make that decision early next week with executive colleagues. I've already alluded to the fact that the vaccination programme is ongoing. It is doing well. We are seeing good progress against North Wales, but I think it would be fair to say that we'd like to do better, and that's in order to protect our public, of course, and our staff. We are continuing to roll out the flu vaccine, and you'll see there supporting our Ukrainian refugees, and you'll also see that we're continuing the emphasis on monkeypox as well. So you'll see there the cumulative data around the vaccination programme. As I say, we are doing incredibly well, and thanks to staff and volunteers who have stepped forward to enable that to happen. But we're also seeing, which we haven't seen previously, perhaps more of a reticence to people to come forward. And part of that is saying, well, I think I'm going to get it anyway. This is feedback we've had. So do I need the vaccine? Others are saying, do I need another vaccine because the symptoms are mild? But I would reaffirm that actually the best protection is the vaccine. So encouraging people, and I do appreciate the fact that you said earlier that you're putting that message out yourselves. So, so COVID is definitely still out there amongst a lot of other respiratory infections that we're seeing. And as I say, we're still dealing with monkeypox, still reaching out to those people who haven't had their vaccination, their first and second vaccination. I would reiterate, it's still there for you, should you wish it. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jill. I think the information giving you've done right throughout the pandemic it's vital that continues. Been appreciated by the CHC, and I know it's been appreciated by partner organisations. One of the things we would be concerned about is restrictions on hospital visiting. I'm sure you know the distress that causes, and the problems associated with not visiting when people are ill and vulnerable.
So Jeff, I'm sure Angela may or may not wish to come in on that, but I think we have definitely learned some of the lessons from the early part of the pandemic, and obviously the severity of the illness, but clearly we may have to go into an area where it won't be close visiting, but we might have to restrict the footfall across our hospitals in order to protect. I don't know, Angela, whether you've got any anything that you want to add to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. Just to say, we've been having conversations obviously with our staff and obviously taking feedback from the public and our patients around visiting. We are looking to try and support visiting as much as possible. Obviously, we're keeping our patients, our staff and our public safe. Looking at identifying patients at end of life care with learning disabilities or dementia, having that supported access, and then looking at doing a reduction in visiting to start off with to identify how severe any surge in the pandemic could be. But we're certainly going to be communicating and making sure that we've got all aspects taken into consideration as part of the plans.
Thank you, Angela. I'm not on mute. Thank you, Angela. I think we've seen a lot of distress caused by restrictions around end-of-life care and friends and family not able to visit loved ones at the end of their life. I'm pleased to hear that will be dealt with more sensibly. We know more about COVID now and the risks associated with it. And as Adrian had just said, one of the reasons that that symptoms are milder is that people have had their vaccinations, and if they want that to continue, they need to continue having their vaccinations as appropriate. But thank you for that. That's good news.
Just one thing, Angela. I agree wholeheartedly what Jeff said about the visiting, especially around end of life care, etc., vulnerable adults. But I visited a community hospital last week where both wards had got COVID, and the staff were concerned. These were elderly people, but they weren't at end of life, and staff were concerned that there shouldn't be a blanket kind of allowing people to go and visit. It should be staged, and in some instances should be restricted, not just to save the patient, but to save the visitor as well. Going on a ward, yeah, and you will have a balance. As Jeff's just said, it's a difficult position to be in, but we're putting the already tired staff at risk.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, go on, Angela.
Sorry, I agree completely, and I think it's that balance, isn't it, of making sure that our staff feel supported and we're not bringing, you know, sort of potential risk in for them as well. But by the same rule, you know, obviously our staff were distressed during the lockdowns and not having visitors in because obviously their patients were distressed. So it is that balance, and it's communicating and working with the teams to make sure it's the most appropriate position and looking at the risks, as you say, you know, vaccinated patients, staff and visitors, and how we can manage that. But the dialogue is open. I've had a number of conversations since I've been in post with staff and with the public to identify how we can do it most effectively.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to think that there are blanket blocks. You know, I would like to think that it's dealt with on a ward-to-ward basis or a need basis rather than a blanket kind of provision.
Yeah, I think we take into consideration the aspects of an acute setting and community settings, etc., when we make those decisions.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'll go one step further, and I think if you do decide to go down the route of identifying the people that need visitors rather than the ones that automatically think they should have them, I think you probably need to put a little bit of communication out there. Otherwise, you will get people saying, how come they have visitors and we can't, that sort of thing.
Absolutely, and having had experience in England previously of those kind of decisions and the way that we work with the teams to do that, we'll make sure that communication is out there and people are supported to understand the decisions that are made.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that brings us to close of business, and normally there would be a verbal report from the Chair of the Health Board. Yeah.
Jackie, could I just come in and just mention to Angela, has she gone?
No,
I'm here.
Angela, I haven't had experience this year of not being able to go in with my husband to, you know, to be with him to answer some of the questions that the medical staff needed to know and to make sure things were in place. It wasn't until the visiting was open that I realised that, well, found that he hadn't been getting the medication he should have been getting. And things like that are really important. So if the next of kin could be allowed in, you know, where appropriate, it would be really beneficial, because he was in for a long time and he missed out on especially one of his medications for a while. And it's not only happened to me, it's happened to another member of the CHC, which I said to her, well, take it forward, you know, but she hasn't. So it is going on, not just with myself, but with other people, you know, and you hear constantly of, oh, they haven't done this, and I've told them this, and I've told them that. But there was, you know, communicating over the phone is very different to being there and making sure it's being done. And, you know, I mean, I tried several times from ED to the next ward he was on, to the next ward, and it wasn't until I was on the last ward he was on that things were sorted.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of this over the pandemic, Stella, people in great distress, that they felt that the patient's needs weren't understood, and they didn't have that opportunity that you normally have when you go into the ward and you have a chat with the nurses, with the named nurse, about the patient's needs. And I think that was during the pandemic, in some cases that was lost.
I mean, people, when they go into hospital, they become a different person anyway. It's not just the confused people, because my husband wasn't confused, but he was a quiet man and he wouldn't shout out, you know. So, I mean, people do need that support, you know, and that contact. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Stella. I appreciate that feedback. Obviously, apologies for the experience you've had previously, but we are going to be looking, as I say, making sure that we can get as much support for relatives, for people coming in. If you need to visit with somebody to give that information, then we'll be identifying what we need to do in the background, making sure that the risk is managed.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Jill, as I started to say, the last agenda item is closing business, and it's normally delivered by the chair of the health board, a verbal report for information. Is there anything you wish to add today?
I don't think so. I think the update that Mark gave at the beginning is probably the points he would wish to raise at the end. So apologies, I can't read his mind.
Yeah. Okay, Jill.
Okay. And could I just remind everyone that for virtually all of these topics, we will be having single item agenda meetings where we'll be able to discuss it in great detail, and you'll be able to question the Betsy Cadwallader's staff who are leading on the matters.
And can I just reiterate, I think you've put it in the sidebar, but if there are any questions that you want to pose back to the health board that we haven't answered, then please do forward them, and we'll endeavour to do that. And I'd just like to thank all of you for the support, critical and otherwise, that we get in order to improve the services across the health board. So I just want to thank you, because I do find this interaction helpful.
Thanks for that, Jill. As I said earlier, this may be our last one, but hopefully not, and we will have a face-to-face.
Yeah, I think that circumstances permitting, it would be useful for the final meeting to be face-to-face. There's a greater opportunity for interaction and involvement when they're face-to-face. When you have a mix of video conferencing and presentations, it becomes very difficult, I think.
So thank you all for attending this morning, and look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.